Grief work is also just deep compassion for the bodies that we occupy. Because it is the single parent, it is the one that's going to have to deal with the stuff no matter what.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Ride. You're on the mothership inside the Black Mama Magic Room with the greatest podcast on earth,
G-Po.
Okay.
That's it, right?
Here today.
She's not here, just me.
It was a slight pause, but okay. I'm not going to dwell.
I keep telling you, I think that's technology. Because I really did.
I'm not going to tarry. I'm not going to tarry.
Do not tarry.
I'm not going to tarry. I am one of your co-hosts, Crystal Tennille Irby, mother of 4.
And I am Thea Monier, mother of 3.
And if we sound a little...
We just recorded with Akilah. That's all
we just recorded with Akilah S. Richards about grief. And y'all got to hang around because the way she did what she did today with me, the level of gratitude that I feel. I mean, this is our first recording after the election. When we asked her to come on, we were thinking, oh, it's winter. Winter's coming. People need to have conversations about grief. People really feel it heavy during this time. We were thinking about creatives and grieving. We had not even thought that we would be in this
position.
We knew it was a possibility, but we didn't know how divine that ask was. And this is a conversation that is so right for the time that we're in. So if we're just a little if we're a little tender, we're a little tender right now. And you'll understand that when you listen to the mac and cheese. Yeah, that's what it is. So Nikisha is not with us. She is traveling today, so she won't be in this episode. This is a regular episode. We'll start out with our responsive reading, church announcements, and praise reports and prayer list requests. Then we'll move to the mac and cheese. And then we'll close out with Black Mama Say. Our mindfulness quote for this episode is revolution begins with the self in the self. And that's from Toni Cade Bambara from the essay on the issue of roles. And the reason that I chose that quote is because in times like these, I think that we can often look outside and be like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? We have the tendency to look at doing outside of ourselves, outside of our homes. And one of my philosophies is the revolution begins at home. And I don't want us to forget to tend to ourselves right now. So that's why I chose that quote. And I think it's so timely for this topic as well. Okay. So Thea has a new puppy. She has Remy. Do you want to show the people? You want to show the people
Remy? He's calm right now.
He's calm right now.
There's his head.
There's his head. So she has a new puppy. So Remy is going to be a part of the show. And if you've been rocking with us since the beginning, you remember
Riley was a part of the show.
Riley was a part of the show. So if you hear Remy, we live real lives. So if you hear Remy, this is his first Then Black Mama's episode.
This is his first episode. He's done pretty good.
He's done pretty good. I can't complain. Okay, so I'm going to choose a card. Card 25.
25 is good.
Girl.
What does it say?
It's our signature card.
Motherhood is not the graveyard of our dreams.
Motherhood is not the graveyard of dreams. It's card. I didn't know it was card 25. Motherhood is not the graveyard of dreams. 25, the number is
7.
7 is completion.
Yeah, completion. Yeah. 7 is completion. 3 is completion. Yeah.
Okay. Dear Mama, let all the myths of motherhood crumble at your feet. Dig motherhood out of under the rock of sacrifice. Mothers should dream big for the children and themselves. You are worthy of your dreams. When you fly, you teach your children the possibilities are limitless. I wrote that. I wrote that one.
You did. You coined
Okay.
that.
So that is our that's our responsive reading for this episode. And now we're going to jump into praise reports, prayer list requests, and church announcements.
Well,
So
I mean, prayer list requests. That shit is long. I don't know if we can skip. Can we skip prayer list requests? First of all, as Black women, I don't know if I want to put anybody on that list this week. I don't. I don't know that I do. Church announcements, they voted for him. They elected him. I mean, they elected him. That's your announcements. We got betrayed. Okay, those are some of the announcements.
Would you say Black women are on the sick and shut-in list right now? Or would that be white women are on the sick and I think, would it be Black, like we're on the sick and shut-in? Like,
we ain't on the sick and shut-in because we quit our jobs. So we are actually on the
Have
I'm going over yonder. We are on the I'm going, play that. I'm going over yonder. That's where we at.
Play that. We know how to write.
I'm going over yonder.
I'm going
so
up
we know how to
yonder.
Write. Oh, up to yonder. That's right.
I'm going up yonder. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I want to go up. But over. You know what we are? We're down by the Riverside.
We're down by the Riverside.
We've laid down our sword and shield.
We're down by the Riverside.
We study war no more.
No more. We down by the Riverside. Okay, that's what Black women are.
I think this week is not a typical. I think we're just doing a little bit of praise and worship. I think it's a little bit of. I don't think we're going the normal way. I think it's a little bit of praise and worship. I think we have. We're down by the Riverside. That's
down by. That's good.
That's good.
That's good.
We're down by the Riverside.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. I like that. I like that analogy.
That's what we at.
Yeah. You know, that's how all my conversations are going right now. It's like,
yeah, that's it. I they elected him.
It's like how you're feeling, and it's like I
also feel like asking Black women this right now just feels like, and it's a stupid question.
For
93% of us. It's a lot of people on the prayer requests, but I'm not making those prayer requests for those people. They got to make their own prayer requests from now on. It's going to be a lot of folks on that list.
So,
but you can pray for my blessings. Look at hands. You can pray for my blessings.
Yeah, I don't have any church announcements. What I am definitely going to do is what I said I was going to do in the last episode. Not traveling, not doing any work outside of this podcast and my writing. Really digging and diving deep on this writing. Thea and I have two dope ideas that we're gonna be writing TV shows for. So
yes.
I'm excited about that. I do have a praise report. My praise report is that
oh, look at you. Just this is what we do. We just zone out. This is the consequence, people. These are the consequences. These are the things they don't talk about. We just zone out. Like mid-sentence.
I'm just praising that I am able to move my limbs because I was literally paralyzed at those results. So that's my praise report. But I don't really have anything else. Oh, I'm learning sign language.
Yay.
I'm learning sign language. I'm very excited about that. Hello, nice to meet you.
Oh, that is great, girl. Yeah. You did that fast too. Show me.
So it's hello.
Hello.
Nice. This hand's like this.
I can't see the other hand.
It's like this.
Nice.
Meet.
Yeah.
So like in sign language, there's no like to.
Right. Meet.
Right.
Meet, so and then you.
Yeah, though they just really do hello, nice to meet you. So they don't point to you. They just do this.
Hello, nice
to meet you. Yeah. Okay. Then I learned what's your name?
Do it again.
So What? Like,
Well, I
what?
can't see your whole body.
Oh, I don't know. Cause that, I
Okay,
mean, that's,
what? I can't do that. What?
I mean, it's not up
What?
here. It's actually out here. Like, what?
It's like this.
What?
It's like, remember the time.
It's not remember this, not this. It's
Remember
like,
my
no,
baby.
it is not
Okay.
that. It is
Is
not
it this?
that. It's just like, what? You know, like, what?
Like what?
But they do it more like this. It's like, what? But don't shake your chest. It's just your
Okay.
it's not what.
I hope y'all watching the YouTube of this because it takes on a whole level. Okay, I have to see that part later. Show me what, because right now you look like CeeLo when you do this. So show me what's your name? Is it name?
What's your name?
Name. Got it.
Yeah. So
I'm so excited.
So those are just like little greetings, but I'm learning sign language. So I'm excited about that. I take time every day to take some time out of my day to do that. I don't know. I've always wanted to learn sign language. I don't know why I'm drawn to it. So I'm just following that. I'm not waiting on a why. I'm just like following that right now. So there's an ASL app that you can download and like it teaches you. So I do that for like 30 minutes a day.
Oh, that's really good.
That's cool. So
yes, I'm still learning Arabic. I'm still taking you're right. These are good things. I'm taking my swim courses. I've also invested in some other work that will not be discussed at this time, but it's helpful. It's helpful. We'll talk about it later, y'all.
It is. I mean, y'all stay tuned. We're going to do a show on it.
Are we? Oh, yeah.
We talked about this.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know I'd be in the thick of it, though.
Yeah, so we're going to do a show on it in 2025. So y'all stay tuned.
Yeah.
So that's a little teaser to let you know that we'll still be around. We're still going to be here, people.
We're still going to be here.
We're still going to be here. We're still going to be here. But I will say, we are going to get, we have always been intentional, but that intention is going to deepen even more now, which I think, it should in response to what has happened. So if you are not signed up
by what has happened, she means they elected him again. Down by the Riverside.
But if you are not signed up for our email list, be sure to
that's what we should say. If somebody says to a Black woman, how are you doing right now? We should just say down by the Riverside.
That's the response, y'all.
Down by Riverside. Because I don't know what you want me to say. I really don't. So I'm going to just say I'm down by the Riverside from now on.
If you're not on our email list, make sure you join our email list. Because, again, things are going to shift. So that just to keep up with what we're doing and what's going on, be sure to sign up for our email list, because I'm thinking we're going to pull back a little bit on social media, and we do next year want to shift to some in-person things. Go to our website and do it. And I'll have a link in the show notes for you to sign up. I do want to send a prayer out to birth workers and Black mamas right now. Black maternal health, that's an important part of this show. And given the results of the election, lifting them up is more important than ever now. We have Black Birth Worker Wednesday every Wednesday on our Instagram. We are uplifting Black maternal health in some way, shape, or form. So I do want to send a prayer out to them and to Black birthing folks. Like, let's hold them in the light. Let's hold them in prayer, and pray that resources are being uplifted and easily accessible to those people. So that's on my prayer list. But so I guess we're shifting.
I got nothing.
You got nothing, Thea?
I'm down by the Riverside.
You're down by the Riverside. Thea's down by the Riverside. Okay. Thea's down by the Riverside. So that's it for our church announcements, praise reports, and prayer list requests.
Yeah.
Y'all.
There it is. That's the thing. That's how we all look like the cover of 40-Year-Old Virgin. We're looking like the people could fly.
Make sure that you are signed up for our email list. Well, I think I've said this like 5 times.
I think we have said that. I just about to say, because I just want to have to stop you. We've said it.
We've said that.
We are clearly dealing with some trauma, and we're trying to push through.
So, we're gonna move on to
let's just go on and let Akilah take it from here. Let's just go on and let Akilah take it from here. And we apologize for the number of times we mentioned that sign up. I think it was about 4 or 5. We just, it's just not normal days.
That's what we are.
But we are down by the Riverside.
We are down by, know what? The email list is down by the Riverside.
That's where you'll find it.
I got it. Boom, baby. If you want to meet us down by the Riverside, sign up for that. Sign up.
That's where we will be.
That's
where we'll be. You know where we won't be? Them streets.
Oh, gosh. Okay. We're going to roll into the mac and cheese.
Okay.
We miss you, Nikisha.
She might not be no good today after that conversation we had with Akilah,
She would not be no good.
She would not be useful. This may be the rare occasion we could not count on Nikisha.
All right, so we are rolling into our mac and cheese. And again, just, I don't know if excited is the right word about this topic, but just, I feel like, I've been trying not to hold my breath. There are times when I'm having to remind myself to breathe, right? And so the thought of Akilah being here with us today, like, makes me feel like, like I can breathe. So our mac and cheese for this episode is about grief and Black motherhood. And Akilah S. Richards, who's doing a lot of work around processing grief right now, is our guest. So doing what we always do, we're going to read her bio first, and then we're going to jump in. And I was telling them before we do a pre-show on Patreon, and I was saying, like, this may be the first episode where I'm like, I don't know, I'm just allowing myself to be guided for this episode. I don't know how much of a producer I'll be. Okay, so here we go. Akilah S. Richards is a mother, partner, and liberationist. I love that. As founder of Raising Free People Network and author of Raising Free People, Unschooling as Liberation and Healing Work. This is going to be my book for the facilitators for my nonprofit this year. The book that we're going to read together. Yeah. Yep. Akilah S. Richards partners with co-conspirators to challenge and encourage social justice-minded people to explore privilege and power in their relationships with personal leadership and all relationships. These days, find Akilah tapped into the wisdom she gathered from her family's transition from schoolishness to confident autonomy. She is savoring her life's lessons after nearly a decade of location independence and 8 years of being invited into various conversations about intergenerational community care across the U.S., South Africa, and Jamaica, where Akilah is from. She guides discussions about how unschooling skills and other forms of decoloniality, I hope I'm saying that right. Decoloniality.
Close enough.
Are shaping families. I know what it meant when I saw it, but I hadn't heard it before. Are shaping families and other cultures of leadership, change, work, and love. In addition to private coaching and public speaking, she facilitates training, small group experiences, and consultations that help resolve the ways that unexamined experiences with bias and oppression disrupt families and organizations' capacity to sustain cultures of belonging. I love that. Whew. You can find her views on self-directed education, Black joy, deschooling, and say it again for me. Decoloniality. For long-time listeners, y'all know my sounding out skills. For leadership and community all over the internet. Her advocacy and organizing work has received national press, including Forbes Magazine, Washington Post, National Public Radio, NBC TV, CBC Radio, and print publications, including the New York Times. Her book, Raising Free People as Liberation and Healing Work is available in select bookstores via PM Press, local libraries, and Amazon. So thank you so much again for being available. As I said before we started, thank you so much for doing this work. And I'm so grateful to know so many women who've been doing certain work for a long time. And that work was made for a time like this. We're going to start, and I think with you, this is going to be a really interesting question. We're going to start with a question that we always start with. Where were you 10 years ago? And did you think you'd be where you are right now?
Yeah, this is an easy. I don't think I was 37, and deeply immersed in like the unraveling that unschooling brought in. This idea that our lives were not going to center our children's like academic lives and careers, and that things like boundaries that we touched on already as we were like so much of what shapes this version of me or these versions of me was informed by my messy relationship with like boundaries and consent and what it meant to be somebody's mama and what that then entitled me to with them. And the unraveling of that is where like, oh, if we're talking about confident autonomy, if we're talking about sovereign grounds for each person in the house, then, oh my gosh, my whole expectation life has been shifted. And so has my children and my partner and subsequently grandparents, because we have that type of family structure, thankfully, that grandparents are very much involved. And there was a lot of grief work that I didn't know was grief work back then. So yeah, so it was a lot of work around boundaries, a lot of work around expectations, entitlement in the direction of me, not like people feeling entitled to my shit, but like me being the one feeling entitled to certain things for anybody who was younger than me, but especially if you came from me, and then wrestling with that personally, and then with other families, and then in community and across cultures. So that's very much where I was about a decade ago, leaning into all of that. Yeah.
How did you get to the grief work? And I also have a, go ahead. How did you get to the grief work? I was going to say, you said that you didn't know that grief work was involved in that transitioning, right? And so sometimes I know for myself, I feel like if I'm transitioning to something quote unquote better or freer, I don't think of loss or grief or any of that.
I'm glad you're saying that, because that's tied into even my response to your question, because it's the integrative aspect of grief literacy is very much what I'm interested in, swimming in right now. Like, we think about grief like you come to it when you need to. You come to it when life brings you to it. When the reality is we're experiencing grief all the time. Just like Thea, you talk so much about joy all the time. Same. So we just not knowing that it's there, as we know, don't mean it's not there. And especially the more you get what you want, the more there is to grieve, because now you have the space to rest from all the not it shit.
It's tight.
Right? That you had
That's tight.
Right? Yeah. And we'll definitely get into that.
The more you get what you want.
Yeah.
There's no expansion without contraction. So the fact that you're getting more means you really did have to let go of something, but did you stop to acknowledge that you had to let go of something? The things of like good and bad fuck us up so much, right? Because grief is one of those things we put in the like bad avoid spaces. And we do not have a culture that has a grieving process. And so because it's in the bad corner and an avoidance space, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to better prepare for what's coming, to better receive what could be coming, and it just to acknowledge what has been. And like this just, and I always think of Akilah, and I think of the word archive too, because, you know, Akilah is a person who thinks about that too. And I think that's a part of the grief work for you, is like, things won't be here forever. Things aren't supposed to be here forever.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've had so much space over the years to slow down, to go from get to the country, all the ideas of, you know, what your family imagined when you came here and all the sacrifices made for us to come American, blah, blah, blah. And then detangling all of those things and getting a lot of the things eventually that you want, and realizing what that cost you, realizing what it cost the people who came before you to get to that point. Even when I think about college, right? Coming here, of course, the goal was that all the children went to college. Even for my like Black American friends, it's not as like overt as like some Caribbean people and West African people, which is all the same people. But here it's more subtle, but it's still very much, it's still very much the expectation. Like if your kid is not going to go to college, that's grief work, because you absolutely think that their life will be less, and it probably won't be, but that's ingrained. And the cost of it in so many places is aspects of culture and connection, intergenerationality, that's lost, because all the adults are working to help make sure that you can afford to go to school and do the things. So you're not getting a whole lot of things as a result of this focus on what can happen for the whole generation plus when you get this better life through more education in this way. So as I became less of a like, oh my God, got to cover the bills entrepreneur to like, oh, okay, this is a little bit more space. Then in 2019, as we've talked about before, I had a funeral for myself because I had the slowest year ever in the best possible way. And that shit gave me so much space to realize where there were a bunch of wounds, but I had just positioned myself to manage them. And now that things were slower, it was like, no, that hurts. That's chronic. That hurts. And I had to let the version of me that knew how to suck all that shit in die. So I had a funeral for her, and I invited my partner and my children, and I had the whole thing. And it gave me the space to realize where so much of the work that I'd been doing with families around expectation and around changes in identity and all these other things as a result of their kids not thriving in school. A lot of what wasn't addressed was the grief around it, not what to do, not why it happened, but the grief, the loss of the sense of identity and certainty and community that comes with a traditional school-centric life. And how we had versions of that ain't had nothing to do with school. It had to do with other endings we'd experienced, other changes that we didn't get to process and compost and see how we want to move as a result of having had those experiences. So I was like, oh shit, grief is the whole thing. It's not a sidebar thing. It's in all the things. So I needed to zoom in on how we care for ourselves when shit hits fan. And that's what got me to seminary. And then after a year and change of seminary, a few different things happened that had me zoom further into integrative thanatology, which is death, dying, and loss. And that's when I was like, oh, everything in me is oriented to this. It's easy. It's flowing. I'm all the things I was struggling with before logistically, but just moved. And that's how I always know, oh, okay, I'm supposed to like really be over here. So hospice care, working with the aging, I just leaned in. Yeah.
Can you talk about the relationship between grief and slow? And the second part to that is, I think when people think about slow, it sounds fantastical to Black people in particular living in a capitalist world, but people generally, the idea of slowing down actually feels like the fear of death, because to slow down is to not produce, and not produce is to not eat, and to not eat is to not, and so they really associate slow with dying. So I would love to hear the relationship between slow and grief, and then some of the like small ways that you begin divesting from a capitalist pace so that you could experience more and more and more of that slow that it takes to be in deep grief.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those questions. When I think about pace and when I think about being free, even when we think about the weekend, the difference between, typically speaking, Monday through Friday versus like Saturday and Sunday, one of the riches in that is the ability to go slower, to not have a belt at your feet moving you from one thing to the next. So if we even think about it in that way, one of the things of slow is that it's a gift. It's a privilege. It's something, not a privilege as in some should and some don't, right? Having more space and more time is usually our goal. We want to have, even if we want more space and more time to do the wrong thing, quote unquote, we know the value of more time and space to do things. So there's that. Just think about the value of being able to do something slower, to not have something at your feet rushing you through. The other piece is, particularly when I think about myself as a Black woman, so much of what is expected of me from all kinds of spaces is that I don't honor my natural pace. I fit in, I make comfortable, I do well, I roll with it. So when I get to sit back and get into my own rhythm, that is something that is special and sacred and organic to me. So the more I can slow, the more I actually get to do things and understand things in a way that's actually original to me, that is specific and particular to me. My noticing skills are enhanced when I'm slower. So I get to notice how some shit feels, and I get to be like, this means this for me because I noticed that. Like, just the space to come back to something alone can be such a game changer. So when we talk about the relationship between slow and grief, the slower I go, the more likely I am to notice that I might need some space to grieve, or that someone else might be grieving in a moment. So I don't need to react to them in that way. I can actually be a grief tender and respond and say, she's grieving that. I can move myself away a little bit. So because grief is going to take the space it needs. Right. So then my awareness is impacted by that in a beautiful way communally, because I can care for someone by backing up and because I recognize that they may be grieving. Right. And if I'm going too fast, I don't know what the hell is going on. I just need the path to stay clear so I can keep going fast. And anything that blocks the pace is the problem. And that's so inhumane.
And as a parent, I'm just going to speak for myself. Sometimes it's like, no, I just need you to get on board. I just need you to get on board so we can keep this thing moving.
Yep.
If you don't have the time to really feel a rhythm, I think a lot of us are in routine, but not in rhythm. So if you don't really have time to feel that rhythm, you're just trying to get people on board so the routine can keep going. And the routine is attached to outcome, because this is the routine.
Exactly.
If you follow the routine.
And expectation and disappointment and blame. And meanwhile,
there's anger. Go ahead.
Meanwhile, there's multiple rhythms going on actually. And you can co-rhythm. Like each of my children can have their rhythm. I can have a rhythm. Chris can have a rhythm. And it doesn't necessarily have to conflict. Because when we are honoring each other's rhythm, then the expectations are adjusted in accordance with that. You might not do it exactly when I prefer you do it, but I know it's going to be done. So I can actually practice not trying to control everything to be comfortable and make my comfort more of an inner world thing and less of a demands on the other people in my house thing.
I think grief, big G or little g, and I would like for you to talk about big G and little g, is is one of those things we get angry at because it disrupts routine. And it's there to reset rhythm sometimes. It's there to reset rhythm.
Crystal said,
let me tell you, because go ahead, Thea. But go ahead.
Yeah, because then we have, if we notice, there's this animosity towards the thing that disrupts the routine, when really that thing is an opportunity to regain rhythm. And I mean, grief is one of those things that there's little things you can do that with, like, even your kids, sometimes you can go past them and get them on board. But one thing that is never going to let you railroad it is grief. You are not going to wrestle it down. You are not going to win. You'll that
never
fight.
Win.
And
never.
It can wait. And it's patient. Grief is patient.
Grief
will wait 50 years
very
to
patient.
snatch you by the throat.
Very patient.
Grief will show up in the form of an illness. It will show up in the form of
it chips away because it's going to make its way.
It's important for people to understand big G and little G so that they can see the ways in which, particularly, I think, little G. I think, of course, we avoid big G, of course. But little G, it don't even hit the radar. And little G is what can really eat away at your life, without you even realizing it. So if you could talk a little bit about that too. Oh, go ahead, Crystal. Did you want to say something first?
Grieving, it's like, everything I believed, everything I practiced, like all of that is on the table now for renegotiation, because this makes no sense. Yep. So what I used to believe, what I used to think, I don't even know if that fits anymore, or if I can take that into this next phase, So it really,
right. So what an opportunity! I mean, as you were saying, Thea,
at the time, I'm gonna be real. I didn't think of it as an opportunity. I was when you said mad.
Most of us don't.
Of course not. Nobody's talking about at the time.
At the time, we are angry because you disrupted
I'm so angry. I had this plan. Yes. I'm going to LA to do this thing.
That's it.
And this is the plan. I'm going to get to this point. And then here comes death. And this is not a part of the plan. But not only it wasn't a part of my plan, but it's like, you cannot push through. You can continue the routine, but it's like slowly you begin to like fold in on yourself.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
and the people around you,
and they
and
on
so
you.
You have to show up for the renegotiation.
And let's talk about that part, because that's the question, that's the second part of the question about what are some of the ways that, especially if we're feeling like busy and, how I don't have time for what this means. The word that I want to offer is tender, right? Tender. This short word, tender. Something happens. And I like to say, like, it tenderizes us. So something like, if we say big D death, like your father's passing, and even the language that we use when you say that you lost your dad, and we use that language. This is a part of the grief.
I'm feeling so tender. I'm feeling so tender right now. Like, I'm feeling so tender.
Exactly. So, and thank you for even bringing up that significant experience. So something happens and we're tenderized by it. The election, the loss of a family member. So we're tenderized. Then we have our tendencies, right? What do I tend to do? I'm going to lock in on work, or I'm going to isolate. And what this work for so many of us for grief tending is to move over from the tendency to like the grief tender. Yes. Right. So here I am in my tenderness, but I am actually a grief tender, not just laid out on the ground tenderized, because a few things with grief. One, it's not a condition. Right. It's not a thing to fix, just like death. A big problem with the medical industry is that most doctors are not trained on allowing a death. So then there's so much loss that happens because you're not actually supporting what is happening. You're trying to stop it from happening. Right? Yes. With life, immediately with the gift of life comes death. Guaranteed. If you got one, then you're going to get the other.
Mm-hmm.
Also, with the gift of joy comes grief, loss, all these other things that are going to sit on the other side of it. So in terms of something you can do, one of the very first things is to check in with your framing of grieving as something to put away or put aside or to fix or to change, because it's actually a skill. The more you live, the more you will lose. The more we live, the more we will lose. From little D death to like, oh my God, my kid don't want to go to medical school, to big D death, like a parent, a child, a pet, like these massive life altering experiences that we have. So to accept that it's not something for you to avoid, but for something for you to learn, become more skilled at processing. That's what grief tending is. So you're saying the first thing is to start to be aware of how you tend to handle grief. What are my grief tendencies? When I'm feeling upset, angry, sad, because all of those things can fit into grief work, all of them, not just sadness, frustration, infuriation, all of these things. How can I savor that experience? How can I slow down and say, oh, is it possible that I'm experiencing some grief around this? How can I tell what's happening in my environment? Am I usually pretty neat, but shit is messy these days because of what's going on? That's an example that you might be grieving. In your own appearance, things that you typically do, right? It can look like depression. It can mimic those, even though it's not, but it can spill over into that if you don't tend it. So if you notice those things about yourself, you can give yourself the space to go slower so that you can check in on some of the ways that the body knows, because grief is a natural thing. So your body is going to want to eat different types of things. It is going to want to watch more things than it is going to want to do more things. You know, can I schedule 2 hours on Saturday to chill out and watch stuff instead of not scheduling time? You find these tiny little ways to just create more spaciousness for when you suspect that you might be processing, because the body is a lot sharper than the mind about alerting us to grief.
I think with grief work, what I learned to do was something that I got from a Buddhist teaching. There's a story about whatever the Buddhist real name is. He was at home, and his enemy came to his door and was like trying to cause some static. Of course, I'm telling you this in the Black Buddhist version. And his boy, who was at the door, who guards the door, was like, "Look, such at the door. I'm about to close. He can't come up in here. He's going to disturb our peace. Blah blah blah." Right. So Buddha's like, "Let him in." He's like, "What?" He's like, "He's about to cause some chaos. Just let him in." Right. So he lets him in. When I think his name is Mara, is his enemy, comes in, and Buddha has like a table set up, and he's like, tea, and he's like, have a seat. And so Mara sits down to have a seat, like, what's this about? And then Buddha like pours tea for Mara first, then pours tea for him. And then they sit there and they just like sip the tea. And then when like after a minute, Mara's like, all right then, and just leaves. The reason I like that story is because it reminds me, if I just invite the things that are difficult in, so what this has looked like, and this is important as Black women, instead of getting angry at the disruptors, I found in my grief work is helpful to pause. And I'm like, what do you want to tell me? Or what are you trying to show me? Or even sadness. If I have a memory of someone that I'm no longer in relationship with, I used to be like, mentally, you should be over it. And now I get under the covers. Yeah. I'll invite that memory in and I'll have it and I'll feel that wave of grief. Here's what I want you to understand about doing this. It builds your grief tolerance, because trying to deal with grief all at once, it's overwhelming.
Or reacting to it.
If you take these little small moments, right? So my pup is bothering me, disrupting me because I'm running, trying to get this stuff done. And he got the ball in his mouth, like, and I'm like, you're right. If I pause, I'm like, you want to play. I'm your only person. I completely understand why you would want this connection. And if I throw the ball 1, 2, 3 times, he's done with me. He's on to the next, and I get to do what I was doing. Same thing with that feeling.
Just wanted some attention. Just wanted some attention.
The sadness, the memory, these things just wanted a little bit of your attention. And the irony is that once you give it to them, like I said, if I pull over those covers, I may be there 15, 20 minutes. But if I try to push it away, that shit can be with me for 20 years.
Exactly. And your body has to deal with it. This is an important part of that. When you're feeling that is your body, because it knows, it can feel, and it doesn't go through as many hoops as the brain to try to get to the person thinking and the person, occupying the body in this round. When you acknowledge the grief, and this is an effective coping strategy to make time, actually schedule time for, because you might not be able to do it then, but you can schedule time to be with the feeling you were having that you tucked away right quick. Because when you do that, then one, it's relief for your body, because when you don't do it from your thinky think, when you don't do it from your conscious space, your body's like, damn, I got to find a place to put this. And now it's thicker because she still ain't touched it. So it's getting thicker, 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 thicker. And each time you make some time to be with it, you're relieving the body. You're allowing the mind to come in. The mind wants to be like, okay, what we think about, you're just giving it the space to do that. And then you do build that grief tolerance. You do become a grief tender. So now you and grief are like this, just walking together, as opposed to grief being on your neck.
And I think the rhythm part, right? Because the thing that helps, what I found about that is it makes the rhythm between life, death, grief, joy more simpatico. Because I'm allowing these moments, and I'm like, this is actually normal. Like, this is actually life. This is what life actually looks like. Because we've been programmed to think life is just all good if we do things all right? And there's a big grief in realizing that that's not true. But life is more like this, And so, and when you're like this, you're like, that grief tolerance that you're able to build up, this just needs a little attention. This just needs a little space. You invite in the disruptive feelings and you allow them to reshape the rhythm, and then you keep in rhythm.
So this is
good, Crystal. Good.
This is tough work. Not because it's necessarily tough, but because we're not nurtured in it. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And we reserve it for reaction only. Like, it's going to be tough if you only do it when shit it needs to be done. I'm thinking of a lot of things right now. Number one, I wrote down grieving cultural practice and tradition and ancestral sacrifice. So like, as a parent, I remember talking to my mom when I was pregnant. I was just talking to her about some things that I wanted to do. And I could feel the resistance in her. And I love my mom. I think my mom is bomb.com. I tell people I have mom privilege because my mom.
She is the bomb.
I love my mom. I don't have no mom beef. Daddy beef. No mom beef though. Right. But I could feel resistance from her. And I'm very sensitive to that with my mama because I just love my mama. And when my son was born, it was the first time I had a baby. So everything was organic. Everybody when they come in, they had to sanitize, and which is, just whatever.
I'm like that with the puppy. I'm like that with the puppy right now.
When you get up, when you had it next one, you be like, it's okay. He need to build up his tolerance. You know what I'm saying? But the first one, it's like, no.
Wash your hands next time.
Exactly. When he started being able to have milk, I just wanted him to have like non-cow milk. But there was a lot of resistance from her. And it would be, well, it was fine for you. Or, I think I did a good, it was that. And I remember telling her like, just because I'm doing it different doesn't mean you did it wrong. And I'm parenting under a different set of circumstances and different access to knowledge, and
under high fructose corn syrup.
But also things have evolved. I have access to more information, good or light and dark in that. Yeah. But I have access. We know more now. We know more about our bodies now than, when I was born. I think this grief work is important it's important intergenerational work. I'm also thinking of post-traumatic slave syndrome when I'm talking about this, like how a lot of times when we talk about parenting and people like new age parenting, conscious parenting, gentle parenting, part of the tension is that we have not properly grieved, I think, just listening to you talk, we have not properly grieved that we don't need these practices anymore. And it can be sad because,
yes.
it can be sad because some of those things kept us alive, like literally some of those parenting practices were a response to, if you do not do this, and if you do not do this right, and if you do not do this way, you can die. And I'm from the South, so I know that was a very real thing. When I said that to my mom, just because I'm not doing it like you did it doesn't mean you did it wrong. That helped her lean in so much more to my choices, even so much so that she is now the most health conscious person in our family. So
yeah, it's like, in a sense, that was like a type of ceremony around her way, a way of being like, this was its own thing, and it served its own thing. Again, archiving it in a sense. There's so many ways that we can do that are not complicated, right? This is why being in conversation is so important, because then we get to realize, again, there's like a lot of stuff we put up on a top shelf unnecessarily. And a lot of that is as a result of the pressure that we've been under to be safe and to perform and all these things we talk about. So I love that you brought up that intergenerational aspect, Crystal. So I had my friend Ivy Felicia, who's the body relationship coach and just a longtime sister friend of mine. We had a conversation last night, a live stream about grief in the body. And one of the things that showed up, I'm so grateful for that call-in, was, and this feels like it's connected to everything that we've talked about already, this realization between the parallels of having a body and having grief. So when you're like 2 or 3, right? Most newer humans at age 2 or 3 or 4, as much as the body image issues because of society, how we're socialized, they're happening earlier and earlier. 2, 3, and 4, you have no problems with what your body is looking like or what it needs, right? You have no problem also with, if you are happy, you're going to express it, or if you are sad or frustrated, you're going to express it. When you're 2, 3, and 4, you kind of make that everybody's problem because you're so reliant on other people for your needs. You're just moving out of that. But the newer humans, right? The ones who are closer to what we are from, we know as newer humans the right to grieve and rage and blah, blah, blah. And we also know the right to just like inherently love the bodies that we're in. As we get older, just like with the messages about the body, we also get the messages about grief. Tuck that shit in, suck that shit up. Don't make other people uncomfortable. So there's this parallel. So if you think about your relationship with your body and the differences from how it started to when you first were conscious of it and holding it a certain way, you can have that very same, you could tell that same story and replace the word body with grief, which says so much about, right? As Ivy talks a lot about body peace and not necessarily body positivity. I'm not going to love everything my mother and father and them had to do. I'm not going to love all the pieces, but I can make such a peace. I can even have a level of deep appreciation for how it got to that point. And the more I do that, the more that's a form of like ceremony and closing out of that and letting in what is for me now with the information and, the composition of whatever energies make me now.
It really makes me think of post-traumatic slave syndrome, because even acknowledging post-traumatic slave syndrome says to me, we have some grieving to do here.
Absolutely.
And she often says, we're just doing these things because we don't necessarily know how they originated. Some of us, some of them we do, but some of them we don't. But we're just continuing it without any analysis of, is this still necessary? Or not only necessary, is it still effective? Is it still effective?
Exactly. And if it's not, eyelid? Can we let it die? Can we actually
Mm.
have ceremony around letting it die, which is not that it is gone
Right.
forever, because
We
we
can
can go back
reaccess
to the
that.
site. We can, exactly, but we are not, it is not an active motherfucking rotation.
Crystal,
It's
what you and Akilah just said together, I wrote down the example you gave about your mom, right? So part of it is we're very sensitive to letting go of things we've thought of as tradition because of how much culture has been stolen from us. So that is
pause,
a reality, right?
Like, pause. Say that one again. Pause for the cause.
Yeah.
Pause for the cause. Because we just hold on, because we just got to get that by itself. Okay, go ahead.
So we're very sensitive to having to let go of a tradition within our culture because our traditions were stolen. We hold on to things long after they're useful or helpful, but we just feel like we never know. You know, I never know if I'm going to this. But also, this may be something my grandmother taught me, and that may be the only thing I have of her to carry forward. And so Black people had to hold things that way, small things, little things, hold on to things like, and grief is about letting go, but letting go for us can feel very, very unsafe, very, very vulnerable.
And that's one-sided, because grief is also about holding on.
Yes, you're right. You're so right.
In a useful way to what
and
remains.
and so what came to me though, when you were talking about the example with your mom, was that we miss out on a key benefit of grief, which is that if we are in an ongoing relationship with grief, we are able to see our progress. By grieving, we can see how far we've come by how much we can let go. And if we don't do that, what ends up happening is we feel like we're not making progress, or we think we're making progress when we're not. And let me bring this to this election.
Okay, can I just need a moment. I just need, let me prepare. Let me just, as we dive.
As Black women, we have died and been reborn and died and been reborn so many times, but have we grieved in that, right? We show up every time over and over again the same way, with the same consistency, with the same passion, with the same fervor. But the lack of grieving has kept us in a cycle that has allowed us to be even more exploited, even more abused. And so when we look at this moment and this election, like, it's time to celebrate our progress as Black women by grieving what no longer serves us and letting it die.
That's right.
So that we can get back to our rhythm, which we don't even know anymore.
Okay. So before you jump in, Akilah, because I know you have so much to say here. and the reason I want to go before you, because I'm going to need your help. Okay.
She said, I'm going to need your help.
I'm going to need your help.
When Crystal does these hands, look at these hands. These hands mean like, stop it. Wait, my sister would say pineapples, bitch. That's the safe word. Pineapples. That's what that means, pineapples.
Because I am feeling this deeply. And when you talked about the body, that really spoke to me. And also when you talked about allowing yourself to, like, acknowledge and sit in the feeling, right, is frightening for me right now, if I'm being honest. Because I'm not only in the South, I am in South Carolina, born and raised here. I mean, just historically, for a lot of Black Americans, is the entry point to this nation. Like, over 40% of Black people who live in this country can trace one ancestor back to the coast of South Carolina, where they came in at. We were the first to secede from the Union. I'm not Geechee Gully, but what that culture and tradition means to the Black people in the state, did Mark Bassey, Mother Emanuel, that's a part of my state as well. And being in the South and knowing that, you know, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die of childbirth related causes in the South, that's higher. Right. And so knowing all of that, going into this election, holding what's going on internationally, Congo, Palestine, pick your poison when it comes to that, right? And holding all those intersectionalities right? But being in the South specifically, deciding, because you having to make a choice of, my solidarity is with those Black women, right? And so that is the way that I'm going to vote. And seeing the outcome, I feel it in my bones, because coming from a tradition that has very much a deep tie to land. Land is so much a part of Black Southern culture, right? And so feeling all of that, and as a birth worker, when I talk about the Black maternal health rate in the South, like feeling all of that like deep in my bones, right? And so when you talked about the body, that's why it resonated with me. But the thought of sitting with the depth of my sadness, the depth of the abandonment. Like right now, I'm grieving solidarity. I'm grieving what social media gave us in terms of the way that it connected us and helped us discover people. Like, that's how I found you. You know what I'm saying? Quite frankly, very rageful right now, which reminds me of a lot of the feelings that I felt, you know, when my father transitioned, when I had to face very, very hard death. And so the idea of having to sit in those feelings as a part of the grief work is really frightening to me.
Thank you for naming everything that you named, and especially that aspect, because a lot of us feel like that. And as we know, as Black women, we understand what it looks like when people are not willing to be uncomfortable, when people are not willing to, not in the same way, but our relationship to discomfort must not be informed by the bullshit way of being with discomfort. We know that we are dynamic. We know that with joy comes grief. We know. So it's not that we have to sit with the magnitude of it, is that we get to bite size, pay attention to, nurture the spaces that have been tenderized. That's what you're doing when you sit with your grief. You're not in the whole ocean of it trying to swim around and figure out how long you can hold your breath. You're in with a whole suit, and you're in this one little contained area, and you're allowing yourself to be in that area, and then coming up and seeing how long it took you before you felt out of breath. How many days did you need to not think about that shit at all again before you pulled out the photos of him the next time around? It's like you're investigating the different ways that that experience is impacting you, and you're giving yourself the opportunity to do it with your consent. So that it doesn't need to be like, it doesn't need to do that. If you're like, today, I feel like somebody looked like him in a picture I saw on Instagram. So I'm going to pull out 2 photos because I have the time today. And I'm just going to let myself sit in that feeling. I'm going to order a pizza, and I'm going to turn off my phone, and I'm going to set this time. And then when the timer is done, I'm going to put the pictures away. And I don't have something scheduled right after this. And I may not touch it again for 6 freaking months.
No one has ever said, investigate it. The idea of like investigating it, and the concept of not swimming around in it, trying to see how long I can hold my breath for. Because I think, if I'm being honest, that's really the only way I know how to hold grief. Like,
so many of us, Crystal.
Like I can
all of it. I can hold all of it. We don't know how.
I don't know how to. I don't know how to hold. I don't know how to hold it in pieces. Like I can just deal with this little piece of it right now,
and that's enough. And that's
enough.
Different type of tolerance.
But there is
a different thing. There's working with pain tolerance, because we've been taught to push past that. So, like, I think this grief work also allows us to say, okay, that's enough for now. Like, I don't want to feel more than that right now. This is good. This feels good. And give yourself credit for that amount of work and that amount of time. And then but have this other part to you that's like, remember the tender part. So the tendencies are the practices, of course, but then the tender part is respecting your own body and respecting your own limitations. And Black women don't know what those are. We are intense by nature now.
No, because we've had to hold all the things for all the
and not only and then there's this sense of urgency, like well, I gotta.
Which is back to the pace thing, right? Yes, that's why we gotta slow down, because we push back against that element of coloniality that says go fast because there's only 4, and if you're not one of the blah blah blah. So it is very much that practice of reclaiming your right to honor what your rhythm is and to move through. Her name is Candace Patterson. The hospice that I work with, she is the bereavement coordinator. There's incredible Black woman who has such a wealth of rich experience around grief tending. And she facilitates this grief group. And one of the things that she was saying to people is that grief is such a thief, right? Like it completely warps your idea of like who you need to be to grieve. And then all you are is grieving. Right. So that was really powerful to me, where it's like, no, I'm grieving and I'm all these other things. So one of the things that came up as a result of her offering that medicine to me is like, oh, grief is this, you get this long-term life partner that is grief. And if you move from the tendencies and the hiding of it and the tucking it away to actively identifying as a forever grief tender, what happens is the boundaries. You get to put grief in its place. Bitch, I said Tuesday at 2:30. That's when we go blah blah blah. And it wants it wants that directive. And it's not always gonna honor it, but it learns to rely on that. Oh, she is not,
because she's not avoiding me. Right. So I don't have to do it.
She's not avoiding me.
This goes back to the disruptors.
And now we even go together differently. Yes. I don't have to pull out all the stops to get her attention. Her body is familiar with me, so it doesn't need to.
We don't have to push it like
it's gonna lift something
This goes back
heavy.
to the disruptors piece, right? When the disruptor comes, in this case, we're talking about grief, but it could be a lot of things. And where our programming,
because grief is a lot of things.
Our capitalist programming says this thing is the enemy right now because it's getting in the way of me doing what I want to do. So what do I fix?
This.
So if I approach the
disruptor let me just say,
with curiosity as opposed to, like, that's the investigative piece. Like, okay, it's here. It wants something. Let me ask.
And let me just say, as a Black mom, I think it's 10 times. I think there's more piled onto that because we're so hyper conscious of our children's existence in this world that it's like you're saying, Thea, like, do we even feel like we have time to be curious?
But that is the
so much of what we talked about.
Right,
that's the decolonizing.
That's
like
it.
That's the moment.
Because we freaking do. And it wants us to feel like we don't have the space. It thrives
That
off
is one of the benefits and the gifts of grief, is that it's like, listen, it shakes you out of like this false reality. I think what it does is it says, you're thinking, if I could just do all these things, everything will be well all the time. And grief is like, that is literally not life. That is not.
Y'all got me hyped now. I'm hyped.
That's literally not life, right? So then it does the thing that's like, bitch, step out of the clouds. That's not life. This is life.
Step out of the
we're
clouds.
mad. We have to be curious, because then it comes the allowing. Allow it to be disruptive. Allow the thing, because there's information
Let it shape you.
in that. Have I taken a pause today? All these different things become, available to us. And so if the goal is rhythm and not routine, if the goal is rhythm, then these disruptors are also working towards our benefit. Even, you ever been in a fight with somebody, like you're fighting and you're going back and forth, and you ever just stop talking? Sometimes I stop talking because we're missing something.
Yes.
And if I get quiet,
not because I'm done.
And that's sometimes it's like that with grief, right? What am I missing about? Here I am. I've tried to go back to work and I'm trying to do this, but you are relentless. So
I'm still tender, and that part has not been tended to. That tenderness is there, and I keep trying to put my body weight on it.
Thank God
and the
it's
shit
still
is
there.
tender.
This is the thing. Be grateful it's still there, because it's still trying to get you to live in the reality of what life actually is, and not this fictional
version. And be prepared for it.
Be able to sustain it. Be able to sustain it. Be able to shape it. Be able to co-create it. In that other reality that we've been building, and even the best of us, the most conscious of us, we are guilty of building false realities sometimes.
Not sustainable. That's why I talk about forget about balance. It's harmony, because shit goes all different directions. You're not going to keep it just like this. You're not going to keep it together. Oh, damn, why I'm not strong enough to do the pull up. Stop complaining and stop trying to do that and then just get against the wall.
There.
Back up a little bit.
Start
and
there.
Push. The pull up is not the problem.
The pull up is not the problem. Well, this is the thing I thought about too. The thing
Wait,
that people
pause for the cause. We gotta pause for the cause on the pull up is not the problem.
The pull up is not the problem. The pull up is not the
pull-up.
problem.
It's not, guys. I'm sorry to tell you. We're going to need to know how to scale
the pull up is not the problem.
The other reason people be mad at grief is grief feels like this sometimes. You playing checkers, okay? You about to jump they king. You about to win the game. And then somebody comes and does this to the board. That's what it can feel like. You know what I'm saying? Because you'll be like,
right, bitch, breeze exists, friction exists. Miss a bump, somebody gonna bump the
I have
table.
my shit together. I got a routine. I've been working out. I've been drinking water. Namaste. And then somebody go, bah!
Yeah.
And then
perimenopause.
And now you are feral, bitch. You ain't as evolved as you thought you was. You not the baddest bitch that you thought you was. And because grief done came and been like, let me see what's really under here. Let me see what's really going on.
That's right.
I want to read this quote. That's
humiliating.
It is.
It's not as humbling.
It's humbling. It is humbling.
That's the word. That's the
humbling.
word. It does. You clear your throat. You tuck your hair back, whether you have it or not.
Look, no size. And I steady be like, because I gotta reach for something.
You be like, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. Oh, okay. Yeah. Like at the election results, I was like, okay. But I want to read this quote. I'm mindful this quote for this episode this is from Tony K. Bambara from an essay called On the Issue of Roles. Revolution begins with self, in the self. It may be lonely, certainly painful. It'll take time. We've got time. That, of course, is an unpopular utterance these days. She wrote this in the 1970s. But we do have time. We'd better take time to fashion revolutionary selves, revolutionary lives, revolutionary relationships. Now, this is the part right here. Mouth don't win the war. It don't even win the people. Neither does haste, urgency, and stretch out insistence. Not all speed is movement.
I need you to send me that one. You said it to me the other day, and I need a copy of my hand.
If y'all watch it on YouTube, y'all gotta go watch on YouTube and look at it, Akilah. Listen.
This is what the education. When you ask me that question, how did I get to grief work? The one word answer is obedience. Obedience. That is not a strength of mine in so many ways, but I say all the time, where I know how to be obedient is with shit like this, when spirits say, over here, because the savoring, the minute I realized that my experience with thriving was directly connected to me having the space to slow down, then I was like, oh shit, it's all about slowing down. So I was like, that's saviorism. The minute I was able to honor that, it was like, oh no, bitch, actually, we're talking about
death and grief,
like stoppage, end game, little d deaths and big D deaths. So the body biologically dying, but also all these other endings. We have to be resourced in grief literacy because the shit is coming. And I just stayed with it. And here we are in a space where everyone is talking about grief, which is a sign of our being resourced, because we know what the fuck is happening. Now we get to really lean in on the skill building.
Yeah, and as a creative, this is so important because I was trained in so many things. I was trained in rejection. Like it's like I remember Thea was like, how you able to get up off this? I was like,
because theater can't do it.
Theater trains you in it. They even teach you, like, when you're in theater, like the industry, like you're more likely not to make it. I was trained in rejection and struggle. It made me believe that I shouldn't be grieving it then. I should know.
Right.
Like
You
this,
should know.
this is
Right.
this is
It's
a part of it. It's a part of the
If
process.
you're gonna stop and grieve every time, you're not gonna make it.
Right. And
yeah, we think we don't have time, but we
or
actually
not even
do.
time, but I didn't even think it was part of the process.
Let alone
Right.
carving out the time.
Like I just thought like that, that's just a part, like that's just a part of it. And even like, I think a part of not grieving that or taking the time to grieve that is also, like acknowledging like, I really wanted that part. I did not want my manuscript to get rejected. I wanted that fellowship. I put all that work in. I let myself vision. Acknowledging that is tough. If I didn't have the word you gave me today, like investigate, what does that mean that you want? Maybe you just wanted it because you just wanted it. And, like, that's just.
But you could lay it to rest if you're able to, which doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean gone forever and forgotten forever. It just means you put it in its place. It means, like in the eyelid course, we talk a lot about seeing the body, right? And it is intentionally non-filtered language because we need the skill building. When you hear of a death, if someone didn't die in a natural way in a hospital, oftentimes they need to go see the body, not just for legal reasons, but so they can be like,
in their mind,
they are dead. They're dead. I need to begin the process
of living
with life after this person.
That is why at Black funerals, when they close that casket, it's the most emotional part of that funeral. When they close that casket.
Because now you have ushered in, we are now on the other side of this thing. We've seen the body. So now we need to take the wisdom of that from our culture and integrate that. That's why integrative thanatology, not just thanatology, is what I'm really leaning into and sharing from. Because now how do we take the wisdom that we knew how to do that and when to do that? How do we put that into our everyday life and death? Because we talk about everyday life, but we don't talk about everyday death. We have everyday death as well. We need to close a casket and then wail and allow ourselves to throw ourselves on top of it for that time.
She's dead.
And then drive away from those grounds and then make an appointment for when we're going to go back to that place, that site, and wail again and again and again for the rest of our lives if we choose. But when we choose, and with the skill of knowing that we are slowly, surely allowing what is gone to be gone and what remains to not be subjected to the fact that the primary thing about this person or this relationship is that it died. It's reductive as fuck.
Yeah. You know what, Akilah, combined some wisdom from you with my friend Meadow, who her and her family steward Greenstone farm out here in LA. And she talked about holy decay, like that she doesn't automatically prune the plants or the grounds because it's important that they allow and respect the process of holy decay. So one of the ways I've been practicing this is, the perfectionist in us, the one that's like, we got to have things right. We got to take care of things. I would see like a yellow leaf, a yellowing leaf on one of my plants, and I'd want to pluck it. So I can only see the green. But lately I'll leave the yellow for a bit. So that it's not my urgency that's taking that little bit of yellow away. It's really at a time when I'm less attached to the outcome, when I'm feeling like more peace, that's when I'll remove the yellow. But when my initial reaction is, that doesn't look good, and then I want to get rid of it, or, I'm learning to do little things like that.
I love what you said about the yellow leaf so much. That's going to stick out in my brain, because even the idea that we as humans, for all we know, the plant has a grieving process, and we just snatched it away and removed the thing
away, and there's something happening there.
Yeah.
There's something happening there.
Yes, I love that so much. And it allows you to sit in the discomfort because every day you see the
it.
contrast of that yellow and you're like, I'm not going to play God. I'm not going to do something about it. I'm going to let it be there until it turns brown. And the plant has a process
For making that,
for processing that shit
and
too.
the thing about it is, it also points out that it's not about the plant's comfort. That immediate response, that immediate fixing is about my comfort.
What's about me?
I don't like to see that.
Yep.
I look at that and I feel like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. The plant's not healthy because I'm not doing something. Right? And by leaving it there, it's not about me. And once it's completely not about me, that's when I'll be like, okay, this has had enough time. Let's remove it so that
it's trying to put energy to these new ones and the old ones are that's what I hope y'all are really like everybody feeling into this. I hope you can take these examples and really put up a mirror to say, what's my version of that? Because this is grief and joy and creative expression and to evolve into what the times are calling for, which is to be able to notice these things and to create ceremony and ritual in your everyday life, your everyday deaths, things like this. I hope you can really take some time to not just be inspired by it, but to be like, what's my version of that?
Yeah.
When you talk about the ocean, do you think grief starts as an ocean or it grows into an ocean, or it depends on?
I think grief is the ocean and the sky above it and the land on the other side. It's just like life. Anything that you would attribute to life. When we talk about grief, we can use that to mean loss. We can use that to mean all types of deaths. It's everything, everywhere. And the location, the separation is the person. The separation is the moment. And even if I hold my breath, I am still part of the respiratory experience happening inside and outside my body. Same thing with grief. But the putting it in its place that is the appropriate separation. I am not just grieving. I am also joyous. I am also a teacher. I am also creative. It's one of the facets of all of my entire ecology. And I don't ever put it away, but I do know how to put it in its place. Yeah. And that's just constant.
I don't know how to give it a place. I offer it a place to live.
Yes. And sometimes it wants direction. It wants that. It just wants attention most of the time. You're not going to necessarily feel better. You just become more skilled, unlike your 2, 3, 4-year-old self where you're like, I'm grieving. Everybody needs to fix that. You evolve that into, this community of one has plenty of tools and resources, including what to reach out for when I realize that I'm in the middle of grief or I made space for the grief.
It's really making me think about a piece of creative work. So I had this idea to write a sitcom about this woman who takes over her school PTA. And I had this idea for years, right? And then Abbott Elementary came out.
That's immediately what I thought of when you said PTA. Yeah.
And I was like, it was on me to write this. Like, it was like on me for years to write this. And I was slow poking around. I had finally taken a class during COVID, started writing it, then let it go. And I will never forget the day that Thea put that trailer for Abbott Elementary into our group text and the grief that I now know hit me. And I have tried to revisit that script, and it's interesting when you said not gone forever, like that. That's sticking with me now. Like how I guess my question is how do I grieve it? Or I don't think I'm grieving the work. I think I'm grieving the idea of what it is. It's hard because it's confirmation that I had an idea that was I had an idea that could have ended up there. But I'm trying, when you I guess I'm asking do I lean into the grief because I'm not exactly sure what I'm grieving.
Yeah. And
but
you
I
don't
know-
need to be.
Okay.
So exactly what you're doing now, literally exactly what you're doing now, where you're like feeling into it. You're seeing if words match up with what you want to express. It's literally just doing shit like that. Like you could use your phone and record it. I do a lot of voice journaling, as I've probably talked about with us before, because there's an education that I get from how I say something, which I can't hear when I'm saying it. Right? Where I
But you can't get from writing.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, writing is the primary way that I process, but voice is different specifically for like anger and grief, which for me, they're pretty blended in. So when I'm hearing my voice, and I'm processing things out loud, that is one of the ways that I might be with grief. So in your case, it's to maybe take the time to go further into the story. Oh my God, what if I had finished that first draft and then who would I have taken it to? What would have been like, allow yourself to go through that process. Now that version of you lives. Now that version can then help inform the other version that's like, oh, I didn't, bitch, you already had a good idea that you ain't such a, like that. Now that's embodied in the community of one. Yes. Now you strengthen that community of one because that version of you that's like, we don't care if it's good enough. We're going to go with it for now. Now she, he, they has a little bit more voice because you have nurtured, you've told a story about them. There are all these selves in here, Crystal, and to do the grief work is to allow yourself to get into the what ifs and see how that feels in your body. What is that calling you to do? Does that actually feel like inspiring or empowering, or does it feel like you feel a little defeated? Whatever it is, you get to be with.
I want to say I got a list of key terms from Akilah.
I just want to say you have laid me out. That's what I want to say. You have laid me out.
I'm gonna make sure because I want
in all the good ways.
This is important. I like key terms and key words.
Okay, I love that about you.
This is good because I want to ask her about language as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, because I've been listening to the language, and that's what I'm writing down a couple of the key words. But there's a trend to it. But I want to say to that piece that you were saying, Akilah, is I think what that also does is allow us to see that story from a different angle, right? And Crystal, you've gone through this with your dad. You've shared this with me where like there was a story you had attached to him. And then after you allowed yourself to grieve him, the story changed and you changed the language of the story. And I think that's something you might want to do with this, right? Like in the beginning, it feels like they attacked me. This is my idea. Like it feels like an attack. Grief can feel like an attack. But I think that
and I'm an Aries.
When you let it,
so it definitely felt like an attack.
It felt like an attack.
It definitely
but then
felt
once
like an
you allow yourself to go through some of that process, you allow in other versions of that story. Like, wow, what if this person is interested in doing some more work together? Or what if there's opportunities? Or let me look at how they did this. Like there's more like possibilities reopen. I think that first initial thing is to close down and we shut off possibilities and we freeze a story. And then as we grieve, we realized there were multiple possibilities, multiple perspectives, other things that were happening. And then you get to choose your story.
Not someone hearing my script in class and being friends with her and then telling her my script. And then that's how she
exactly. You get to have more ideas. Yes.
More versions of that.
Yep.
You know, that's one. That's one. But there
that's
could
one
be
of
more.
many.
That's
yes.
one.
No, that's the version that I was holding on to.
Yes.
Oh,
that's where
God.
the freeze was.
As
that's
your friend, I didn't know. As your friend, I didn't know because she froze so hard.
Froze
we could not talk about the show at all. In her presence, like we couldn't talk about it.
This is how much I have avoided grieving it. I don't even allow them to put clips of it in the group chat. I'm like, don't.
And that's a great indication of an area that needs a little, that's an area that's tenderized and it needs a little tending
Tenderized is on the key word.
So and I feel tender. I feel tender around
it. Of course you do. Of course you do.
The key term list all has to do with tend. So if you don't remember all the words, just remember the word tend. Tend, attend, tender, tenderize, tendency. These have been like the key key words.
That is it. She done wrote my sermon.
I did.
Thank you for that. Because what I've been zoomed in on is very much like the being tenderized by something and feeling tender, and then moving that tenderness into the space of grief tending.
Oh,
which is
we also say
is.
Attention because you said like attention. attention,
Send me the
because
ace, yes.
I'm gonna send you this. Attention, because that's,
Yeah.
I remember you said attend, but then attention, you know, is tending to.
Yes.
Just turning your attention to something is tending to.
The Latin root word.
Here we go. Let's get
tend.
deep.
Latin, you know where they got it from, really, though.
We're gonna talk about
Right,
that
yeah,
later.
Latin.
Okay.
More grief.
Yeah.
More
Okay.
grief. More grief.
Okay. The Latin word "ten" means hold.
Okay. Right? To not ignore, to not put aside, to not blame, just like we do with the body. If my shit would just stay the size that I would like, then right? Yes, all the daggers, blow darts, everything in all directions over here. Yes. Right? When we are not playing over in that world of grief tender, when that's not this woman named Nicole gave me this word, towarditude. When that's not our towarditude, when that's not what we're moving towards, then everything else is the problem. The people, me, my body, my this, my that. When, as you tend to it, you give it a little bit of attention, you expand not only the stories, but also the different versions of yourself that is fully capable of handling all possible versions of the story. That's why I keep talking about the community of one. To be in healthy relationship with your grief and your joy, your life and your mortality, is to be able to have the skills for whatever. It's, you know how people were first talking about nervous systems and they were like, my nervous system needs to be regular, as if the point is to keep your nervous system at one place.
One
it's
level.
like, no, the point is, if it's healthy, it can manage all the things. Same
That's right.
with grief.
That's 100%.
Tending. It's not about when things are fine. It's when death and grief and loss inherently show themselves as part of life and joy, and you become more skilled at, because you know who you are in those moments, you know what your tendencies are, you've been practicing some of the skills that bring you from tendency to actively tending to, and then you pollinate spaces with that, because now you're not showing up with the defense and blah blah blah. Only you can still have it, because grief likes company. You can have that thing, but you now also have with you the part of you that's like, girl, no, this just means you're a freaking idea maven and you got a million of them, and it's a matter of which one you're going to choose for this thing now. And the part of you that's sad and can't handle it and don't want to see no fucking clips, she can be tended to, while this other part that's like, how do I nurture her too?
Jessica Schaefer is on an episode of Shaping the Shift, and she does nervous system reset. And the first thing she said that liberated me instantly is, a healthy nervous system is not always at whatever your homeostasis
like
is, whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, a healthy nervous system is not that. It's not zen all the time. A healthy nervous system has to be able to know how to fluctuate between them. For me, that was crazy. Everything in wellness to be like zen, calm. And also being a Black woman, you feel like people want you to be that way all the time. Like,
and
that
we
is
give
not
people credit
healthy.
for like,
yes,
oh,
we think
they're always level-headed.
Actually, now I know they're weirdos. Yeah. Now I know. I knew I felt like they were weirdos. Now I'm confirmed.
That's right. They're all tucked in. You ain't got a
healthy nervous system.
Yes.
Yeah, they're all tucked in. You ain't got a healthy nervous system.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so what that made me think of was, so one, she destigmatized for me being overwhelmed. She said, once you reach overwhelmed, you should be grateful to your nervous system. It's telling you, hey, that's enough.
Yes. And that you recognize it.
So I started to be like, whoo, I'm overwhelmed. This is great. I'm glad to know that. It reframed that relationship.
Yes.
But then I thought about like all the things that triggers, like reactive, activate, act, which is do, which is the opposite of tend, which is to hold. Right? So really we're moving from activity, activate to tend, attend, tenderize, attention. That's the shift. The shift is from act to tend.
Yes, that's that do to be. That's in that same world.
Yes.
That's it.
If you missed it, that's your shout cue. If you missed it,
that's where you should have passed the plate. That's where the plate needs to go around.
We have at least one shout cue every episode. That's your shout.
I love it. Yes.
That gives us some simple language to hold on to when we're in the act.
Yes.
That's a sign
Yes.
to stop and tend.
Yes. Oh, I might be grieving. That's why the investigation is important. Am I grieving? Oh,
yes.
shit.
Am I
That's
grieving?
what's happening. No wonder
That's
I can't
what's
even take in
happening.
no logical shit she's saying, blah, 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 blah. I'm grieving. Then, yes. It is, as Thea said at the top of this, it is an invitation to be like, oh, something's happening. It's trying to tell me something. So of course I don't want to blame the thing that's telling me so, because that's also what we learn, that our skills are inherent motherfucking alchemy. That's been stifled and called all kind of things out of its name. So to be a grief tender is to recognize I'm so built for this shit. Like, I'm so aware that everything I love, I lose, as the phrase goes. Everything we love, we will lose. That's such a sobering, and it's not lose in the, white centric way. It's like, no, it returns to its origin, and everything that it is of and it represents and it brought in beautiful ways lives. It's unkillable. It cannot die. And if I know that, then how much can that frame the little d deaths that I experience when my expectations inevitably not only are not met, but are shattered?
Before we go, I want to talk to you about language shift. Because you just shifted some language when you talked about lose and lost. Because I think a lot of times culture is trying to shift, or something is trying to shift before we even have the language for it.
Yes.
And then it shifts. And once I feel like we get the language for it, and that language becomes a part of the lexicon, then we can really recognize the shift. Like, for example, I'll just take Black Lives Matter, right? We felt that shift. When Trayvon Martin died, this was different. Like, this had been happening, but we could feel the shift, but we didn't have the language for it. And the language was Black Lives Matter. And at first, people are afraid to say it. People don't want to say it. People are trying to co-opt it or change it into something else. But then it's painted on Main Street. So I'm not saying that, but now it's like in the lexicon. And to me, that's like,
it's in the culture.
It's in the culture.
Yes.
So
language is culture.
Really shifts something. Even the way that we have expanded our language around gender.
Yes.
And for me, I can hold on to that when it comes to the times that we're in now, because I'm like, who won, who lost, we're not going back, because because of that language shift is a signal to me that so many shifts have happened that it's going to be much harder than it used to be to go back. So I'm always interested in language, and I'm a writer, so I'm always interested in language and shifting language.
I love the question, and a few things come to mind immediately. So one of my teachers in this work around death and grief, her name is Wilka, Wilka, Roig, Roig. And one of the things that she said, and I don't remember if I said this before, but it's relevant again, so I'm gonna say it again if I did, that she said something that really rocked my world. You know how when your friend talked about the nervous system, and that shift for you, for me, it was when Wilka said, there's no such thing as a bad death. I was like, if you don't get ma'am, sir, I was so offended and disrupted, and like my belly, like I was so, what? And she continued to talk, and it has moved me so much since then, because that's life. With life comes death. The circumstances of someone's death can absolutely be horrific, but the minute you are born, you are guaranteed a death, and there's no guarantee that the death is going to come a certain way. It's actually not a realistic expectation from any indication of any form of nature that death should go one particular way. How we get dead is just as diverse as how we get born. So that's one thing, to reframe the idea that death and dying is something to avoid or something bad. Death comes in as much as many plants and trees we have types of death. So there's that. The other thing is, we learned in thanatology school that they're shifting the language of saying that somebody committed suicide. We don't say that anymore. We say they died by suicide, because again, death in every form is valid. Not how they died, but that they died in every form. We don't say, cancer
they committed
killed her.
cancer. Right.
Yes, right. You know, she let cancer take her over.
Right.
There's actually a religious kind of element to why we say committed suicide, which is
Absolutely.
inappropriate.
Yeah.
So that's an example of a shift. If you really sit with why we don't say that, then another one is, again, culture is language. Everybody don't understand everything Black people do, and you don't need to. So I say this one with that in mind, because sometimes culturally, when we as Black folks in our diversity of Blackness say someone transitioned or lost, we say transition or pass because we're honoring that they didn't finish, that they're in another realm, that they are now ancestors. So I want to say to us that is valid, and it doesn't stop us, though, from interrogating why sometimes we will not just say that someone died. Or even using the language of loss. That one particularly I want us to sit with. Loss meaning what? We're only talking about the limitation of the physicality, which we know there's so much more than that. So if you saying I lost the capacity to touch my father, then fucking say that. Because he's not lost. Certainly, he's actually exactly where you can find him every time, unlike when his body was here. So things like that are examples of how we can begin to say, how much of this is, yes, this is what I mean to say, and how much of it is, it's because I actually haven't checked in with what that means.
For me, it's very difficult for me to say, my dad died. That is
of course
hard. And I actually didn't say it for maybe 2 years after, because, and I remember hearing myself say it for the first time. I was like, that's the first time I've ever said that.
Yeah.
It is language avoidance for me, for sure.
Yeah. And it's not that you need to fix it. It's just to be aware of that, so that as you tend to your grief, you might practice saying it just for yourself. You know, or watching your mouth as you say it, and not say it out loud in the mirror, but just watching the
it makes me well up. It makes me like right now my chest is like tight.
Yeah.
Full of tears.
That might be enough for now.
Yeah.
Some of the language that's helped me around it is, I'll say something has shifted. And I think because I connect shifting with change.
Yeah.
It reminds me that grief is a form of change, and change is natural. It's a part of life, you know. It's also an acknowledgement, right? Something shifted.
Yes.
Right? Something happened.
Yeah.
Because I think even sometimes when I use the language of dead or death, for me, I don't know if that initiates a process. Because for me, it's like then it stopped. And I understand that, but then there's a part of me that will then, I don't want to say, maybe it is avoid. I don't know. It stopped. So I will stop thinking about it.
It's over.
Right. Over.
Yeah.
Over.
Yeah.
That's the word. And shifted means something's changed. And that lets me know I'm going into a process.
That's right. I love that.
I have to adapt to a world where that isn't there anymore, because and that shifted things. That thing not being there shifted something.
Absolutely.
For those of us who move more like with our brain and avoid the heart part, like it can be like, okay, well, there's nothing more I can do there.
Yeah.
It's a trap.
There's nothing more for me to do in that category. So check. And really, there's a lot coming that you're going to have to be with.
Yeah.
So and if you're not with it, your body will be the one carrying it. That's the thing for me. Like, Grief work is also just deep compassion for the bodies that we occupy.
Yeah.
Because it is
Oof.
the one, it is the single parent. It is the one that's going to have to deal with the stuff no matter what.
That's right.
The body.
We got to pause for the pause
parent.
again.
Yeah, that was a good one. Pause for that.
Grief
Pause for that.
is
The
grief
single
is-
parent.
Yeah, and I was raised by one, so I'm
So
listen.
you said
Yeah.
grief is what again? Grief is the body.
It's compassion. It's a practice of deep compassion for the body. The body cannot speak for, it can't make you do anything. It can only show you when you're not doing some shit. Right? So that aspect of saying, when I give myself the space to grieve, that's me saying to my body, I know you don't need another thing to deal with. I'm not going to try to suck you in or tuck you in or put you away or cover you up. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's why I do this, Crystal, because I need this shit. Exactly what you're doing right now. Like I gotta live in that space because that's what I'm called into right now. So I feel everything that you are saying non-verbally right now. Yes. Yes. Thank y'all so much for
This
this.
has been a tender
depth.
show.
Listen, if we were on Zoom, you would have seen my back. I have a background that says tender that I use sometimes to just like alert people. Because since I'm so tender right now, so tender right now.
Yeah.
Like burst into tears at any moment, tender. Yeah.
Well, I doesn't even capture what this did for me and will continue to do for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the listeners, I can't wait for them to hear this episode. I really
And
can't.
Remy, is this your first major grief conversation?
It is. This is his first recording.
This is
Thank
first
you for
recording.
processing with us.
And he's been looking at me like, are you okay? Is everything okay up there? What are they
Yes, I'm
saying
just
to you?
grieving. Yeah.
What are they saying to you?
So Akilah, how can
Yeah.
people engage your work, engage
Yeah.
Eyelid? How can they do that?
Thanks for asking. So I call Patreon my church, and I love that Patreon has everything from like open public membership to, paid. So patreon.com/Akilah, AKILAH. That is my church. And I'm also on Instagram at Radical Selfie. Substack, Savor Complex. I'll make sure y'all have those links. I write
So
sporadically
good.
on there.
Savor
Ooh. Yes. That's
So
a
good.
whole thing. Yes. So and then I have RFP, Raising Free People, Unschool.com. That's where the Eyelid Grief course is. That's where a lot of my courses around deschooling our relationship to self and leadership lives. Yeah.
And
I can't recommend the course enough.
Thank
I think
you.
you probably got like 3 or 4 of my peoples in there right now.
I do have
I was
some of
not
your folks in
playing.
there in this
I was
round.
not playing.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
was sending them the links directly like, you need this. You're welcome.
Yeah.
And if you haven't listened, if you haven't listened, give a listen to Fair of the Free Child. The
Yeah.
episodes
Thank
are
you.
still out there. And I think the last season was, you all can start at the beginning, but I loved it. And
Thank
listen,
you so much,
I am a
Crystal.
person who does not watch season finales. I got a show
me in
right
the
now.
shop.
I invested 3 years
Get me in
in,
the
and I
shop.
got 2 episodes left. And
you do?
She would not. She does not
will
watch
not.
the answers.
It took me, I did not watch the season finale of The Office until
Yeah.
years later. I couldn't. The series finale. I don't, that's grief work. That's
what I was about to
grief
say.
work.
That's just a part of your grief ritual.
That's grief
Look at
work.
you with rituals. Yes.
That's
yes.
what I just, but I was like, I am mad that she's ending, but I understand.
But I
Yes,
understand.
the elder has been laid to
Yes.
But the way in which you did it
Thank you.
Yeah.
was just
Beautiful.
so beautiful.
Thank you. Shout out to Naz. Shout out to Vanessa.
Yeah.
Shout out to Juan. Shout out to Daniela.
Juan.
Everybody who was part of making that happen. Yeah.
So beautiful, so intentional. So if you all
Thank
have
you.
never listened to Fair of the Free Child, take a
Yes.
listen. I would say, I mean, again, my children go to public school. My husband is an educator.
Oh yeah, it's so much more
But
than
it's
school
so-
or not school.
but
Yeah.
it is so much more than that. And there's still things that I can interrogate and use in there,
Yeah.
even though I'm on another journey. So
Yeah,
I
because it's
just-
about humans and leadership
Yeah.
and love.
yeah,
and
yeah,
learning.
yeah. Ask this.
Thank
She
y'all
just-
so
yeah.
much. Yeah, I appreciate this conversation. And I have to say, what y'all are doing and continue to do with how you show up in this work and what this podcast, the offering that this podcast is, and the way you do it, so I can dip in when I really need to and dip out without the guilt. And if y'all are listening and not part of the Patreon community, now you're doing the behind the scenes, like you're just,
Yes.
the access to yourselves is like so generous and beautiful and needed. So thank y'all too.
Thank you. I'm
Yes.
glad. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. So yeah. Okay, this is our final segment, Black Mama Say. And this is where we put our own twist on sayings from Black mamas. But we're going to do something a little bit different this time. We are not necessarily going to have a saying, but we are going to offer what we're holding on to get us through this time. What is helping us move forward in this time. You want to go first? You want me to go first, Thea?
No, I have to remember it.
Okay, so go ahead.
What I'm holding on to during this time, what's keeping the guardrails up for me is that I started swim lessons and I go every week, which is also doing some things for me around like hair care that I'm enjoying. And also that I'm staying consistent with my Arabic lessons. And I think like as long as I follow things like that, like my water goals and these language goals and these learning things, that I'll find, some happiness.
So you're holding on to goals that you had previously.
I absolutely, listen, I remember thinking like, oh my God, are my goals still relevant? And then I looked at them, and because my goals were about me, they stayed relevant.
That's good.
I think that's really important.
So what's keeping me going right now is I'm doing a little bit of escapism. So this Martha Stewart documentary, y'all.
It sounds good. It's on Netflix, you said?
Yeah.
What's the name of it?
Martha.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't want to look it up, but I think she's an Aries, but I just don't want to look it up. But I feel like she is. So that's a little escapism for me that I'm practicing right now, which I think is okay. And the other thing that's really holding me together.
Damn, she's a Leo. August.
Bitch!
August, Leo.
Bitch, she's a Leo. That was funny as fuck. That was funny as fuck. God, that was funny. That was funny.
August 3rd.
Bitch, that was hilarious. That was hilarious. When something is so hilarious, I can't even finish the word. That was hilarious. Oh my God. Why did you look it up? You know why you looked it up?
Because I thought you were right.
And you're being petty. But the other thing that's really getting me through this time, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because I wanted to say thank you to you, because your friendship is really getting me through this time. And being in community with other Black women, we held space for Black moms the Sunday after the election. And I called in some people who had been building spaces for Black moms for years now to help us hold that space. And it was just so beautiful.
It was really nice.
And,
it really was.
So affirming. And so that is really, really getting me through right now. And so I'm so grateful that I had cultivated those relationships, that I was able to call on them. And I'm just so grateful that our friendship has lasted. I don't take that for granted. And so that is, my friendships are really getting me through right now. There are times when I have called Thea just like raging and crying and, and she's been there and she's picked up the phone every single time.
Hmm.
And I just don't take that for granted. And I truly, truly appreciate it when I thought that I was going crazy. You know,
Yeah.
you really, really settled my soul. So that's what's getting me through.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be your friend.
Yeah, this is
Give you
getting
some
me
of
through
my
right
blue
now.
state energy.
Girl, blue state energy. Blue state energy.
We're gonna write. We're gonna be creatives. We're gonna write, and that's what we do. We still gotta document life. We still gotta do the thing. Yeah.
That's probably the third thing is minding my business. And my business is creating. And when I'm not minding my business, Oshun trolls me. And knowing what is the business of the Orishas, what is the business of God, and what is my business.
Right.
And I think
which are very different.
Right. And I think that I have been concerned with the business of God and the business of the Orishas or the business of other people. There are other people doing that work that needs to be done. And so I can mind my business.
Business. Yeah, because this is the business I do. Yeah.
And that needs to be done. The last thing that's getting me through is cross.
Wait, did you start it?
You know that I did.
We just got off middle of the night last night.
You know that I did. Cross, starring
very good, as Eo would say.
Hodge.
I'm going to watch that today.
As a detective.
It's nice.
Can get you through.
I can get you through. Look at her eyes.
You need a little
See how low her eyes is? We know what that is.
If you just need a little something.
Crystal has small eyes, but they're very informative.
Follow us on Instagram at Dim Black Mamas Podcast. And if you don't want to miss a minute of the magic, and sign up for our recently revamped newsletter, The Mothership, which includes reflections on the conversations we've been having and hearing. And we also share a collection plate cause where we'll spotlight causes and initiatives that resonate with our community.
And don't forget to check out our website, www.demblackmamas.com. Dem Black Mamas is a conversation, so our inbox is always open. Send us your thoughts about the show, show us some love, and ask us some questions at magic@demblackmamas.com.
And be sure to listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Rate and review us. All right, that's all we got.
Listen,
we ain't
y'all,
got no more.
Find you down by the Riverside. Headed there right now.